Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Wood Heat Wednesday. This week I'm going to share 5 tips of things you should be doing late summer that can really have a big impact on how smoothly your wood heat in winter goes. So on average, we light our stove in about 3 weeks. So wood heating season's coming pretty quickly for us. I got a lot of stuff to get done. So as I was starting to get going on some of my chores and trying to get things prepped and ready for this upcoming winter, I was thinking about some of the different things I do, and I thought I would share my top 5 favorite tips that can really help make your winter a whole lot easier. First things first, I would definitely start trying to think in reverse. If you're someone like us that brings your wood in, maybe you're putting it into a wood shed, maybe you're just tarping your wood for the winter, try to pay attention to what types of wood you have where. So I know not everyone moves their wood in for the winter. This is where we put our wood in for the winter. Part of the reason we put it in our pole barn is because, one, it's less trails we have to keep open. We always keep the driveway open to the pole barn open. And two, it's secure. There's a roof over, so it keeps nice and dry. No one can run off with it, and it's within easily sledding distance from our house if needed, if we couldn't get a trail open to get the wood hauled in here. A lot of times when I'm filling the wood racks, I'm always trying to think in reverse. What am I going to be burning next spring? So I try to load softer variety woods, smaller splits, something to just take the chill out of there. You don't want to use all your nice hardwoods in the spring and the fall time. Obviously, you see those for the real cold spells of the winter. You know, so I'll have some smaller splits like that. Maybe I'll have something like this, some chunks of poplar or something. I like a 70-30 mix blend. 70% hardwood, 30% softwoods as we get into the deep of the winter, because softer woods tend to be a little bit easier to light up, but the harder woods last a whole lot longer. A lot of times, I'll, at least on the back wall here, I'll kind of separate them a little bit. You notice I got a lot of the smaller pieces and softer wood varieties on this side versus that side. So if we have a winter like last winter, and it ends up dragging on, now suddenly we finally snap out of it, we can kind of grab from the harder wood varieties, but if the spring comes a little bit earlier, we just grab more from that area, so we're not using up a lot of our nicer hardwoods. So the same sort of deal here. So as I start filling this in, I'm going to start filling it in, or moving to much more of a harder wood mix, and then as I finish off here, I'm going to try and finish up with a bunch of softer woods, since that's what we'll start with in the fall time. So tip number 2 is double check your work. This is your last opportunity as you're shuffling things around to make sure things are going to fit in your stove. I know for myself, I tend to get lazy sometimes. I end up cutting logs a little too long, or maybe I don't split them up small enough. Then it comes time to load that stove and it won't fit in the door. Or worst case scenario, I'm trying to reload the stove. I already got a bed of hot coals in there. I throw a log in and I find out it's too long for the stove. Now I got to pull this thing out, and what do I do with it? Do I just set it right there on the hearth with the potential of it igniting? Reality, I got to take it out and dispose of it in a proper area, and then later come out and lop that thing off to the proper length. So right now is a good opportunity to double check your work, make sure everything's going to fit in your stove that you're going to be using for the winter. A couple tips I have around that is, one is, if you have a log splitter, mark that thing up. Put some marks on there with some different increments. We'll mark ours off with 2-inch increments, starting at 16 inches and going up to 22. Our stove will accommodate up to 22-inch logs. So when we get into the real cold snap, late January, and we want to really maximize our stove and be able to use a full-length log in there, we're able to quickly find those logs and measure them and make sure that they'll fit in the stove. We also like to have it marked down to 16 inches. Maybe we don't need quite that full length, or maybe we need to help someone else out. Maybe they underplanned for the winter, or maybe they have fallen on hard times, and with having a couple different increments marked on your equipment, it's pretty easy to identify them by length. Another area that I like to mark is actually the trailer that I use to transport the wood. That way I can quickly double check things. I think it's the skinny ones that always throw me off. Either they're longer than I think they are, or they look longer than they really are. And having that right there, as I'm shuffling wood around, I can quickly check without slowing down my progress as I'm getting wood shuffled around. So you'll notice I have it actually marked on both sides of my trailer here, so it doesn't matter what side I'm working on. If you take like a piece like this, looks pretty long here. If I actually line it up down here at the end and then come down and look, you can see it'll easily fit in the stove, and it's looking more like it's about 20 inches long. So tip number 3 is get out, take a stroll in the woods, and start marking trees that you're planning on cutting this winter. Right now is a great time because the leaves haven't dropped. It's going to happen soon. I'm already starting to see leaf change happening. But if you have the extra resource of the leaves, it's a lot easier to identify different tree species. It's also easier to identify the actual dead trees. Then if you get out and cut in the winter, there's a lot of great benefits to doing that. When you're working in cooler temperatures, the tree has the least amount of moisture at that time of year. The ground is nice and hard, so you're not rutting things up. Less bugs at the time, and less chance of spreading any diseases that can infect trees, such as oak wilt. Tip number 4, utilize a moisture meter and double check your work. I can't stress enough how important dry firewood is. In a moisture meter, it gives you solid numbers to be able to test to make sure your wood's dry enough. 20% moisture or less is what you're shooting for. And I can't stress enough how important dry wood is. It really makes all the difference when you're heating with wood. Especially since newer EPA stoves are a lot more picky and require very dry wood. You have a lot easier to start fires with dry firewood, less creosote formed in your chimney, so less risk of starting a chimney fire. You just have overall a much better experience heating with wood and utilizing dry wood. Another thing is these things are relatively inexpensive. You can get them for about $15 or less. Pretty good one for about $30. And if you're someone that purchases wood, this is really a must-have. I can't tell you how many times you hear guys say dry firewood. They come to drop the wood off. Someone loads it in their stove, starts firing it up, and you can see water boiling out the end of it. Having a moisture meter allows you to check that wood long before it's ever unloaded off the truck, and if it's not dry enough, send them on their way and bring in the next guy. It can really be a big cost savings, and especially with these things being so relatively inexpensive. So tip number 5, don't overlook kindling. Kindling is one of those things that always seems to be an afterthought. Spend a little time up front right now while the temperatures are still reasonable, and get a lot of your softer woods rounded up and split up into some real nice chunks of kindling. It really makes a big difference. You get up in the cold morning and trying to get a fire going, or maybe you're gone for several hours. It always seems the time you're just scrambling trying to find kindling. And taking a little time right now and getting that stuff taken care of really will make things a lot more delightful. It's also a pretty important thing when it comes time to get a fire going. You want things to get nice and hot quickly. That way it helps establish a draft, sort of that suction that sucks the smoke up and out your chimney. That way you're getting less smoke coming back into your house. If you'd like some additional tips on creating and storing kindling, I've done a video on this in the past. I'll put a link to that down in the description below. Another video I definitely recommend checking out that I've done in the past is 5 different tips of things to look over before you light your wood stove for the first time in the season. I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. It's a lot of just basic reminders such as checking your smoke detectors, fire alarms, and a handful of other things to really help get you started off on the right foot for the wood season. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.